39. So 10 years between them. Sister's the head of the family, they're both Catholics. We take this, it gives us information about all sorts of other things that they do. Now, we see that Catherine was born in America. I didn't make that up, it's there. She could have been a member of one of your clubs, had she been. She is a cook, which would have been a skilled thing to do, and she's not living in a household cooking in. So she could have been cooking in a restaurant or in a hotel at this point in time. And her sister Mary is a general worker, which could mean anything. She's not a domestic servant. She could be doing any kind of work. They're both single. They can both read and write. Neither of them speaks the Irish language, which is one of the questions you were asked at this point. Both of them are single, and neither of them has any specified income. So you get that information there. Then you can also look at the form filled out by them on the night. This is lovely because if she does happen to be your grandmother, you've got the form signed by Catherine Murphy here, she's a great or whatever, filled out by her on the evening. The other questions that are asked in the census at this point in time here, there's a new question asked for the first time in 1911, very, very germane to women. It asks you how many years you've been married, how many children have been born to the marriage, and how many of those children survive. So for the first time we start to get really micro information about child mortality. She doesn't tell us any more than America, which is a shame. We'd love to know where in America she might have been born. As I said, Irish and English, they only speak English. And then the last column here sounds terribly politically incorrect to us these days, but it sort of meant something then. You're asked if you're deaf and dumb, if you're dumb only, if you're blind, imbecile, idiot, or lunatic. We think, oh my God. So far as psychiatric terms with respect to all psychiatry, but here should have any meaning, those have some meaning there. So that's your quick way to be able to look at your ancestor. Now, you might also be interested in other things about them. For example, what sort of house did they live in? And here we have a wonderful thing called the house and building form, which asks a number of questions about what kinds of houses people have. So I just really don't try and read into this quite too much. On the left-hand side, it asks you whether the house was built or being built. You can see that criteria. Next column, whether it's a private dwelling or some other kind of building. Okay. Now, if you're looking, say, at the main street of a small town, it will tell you whether it's a church or a forge or a factory or a shop, and if it's a shop, what kind of shop it is, a public house, of which there are very many of those in Ireland, or whatever else it may be. So if you're doing a local study, if you've come from this part of the country, it's wonderful to be able to build that dense, rich idea of what the street was like. Then there's a little quiz along here that asks you what the walls and the roof are made of, perishable or non-perishable materials. How many rooms in the house, and you add those up and you get a number. How many windows in the front of the house, and then you add those and you get what class the house was. And you see that the houses on Church Street, as I would expect, were third and second class houses at this point in time. We also see a small bit of overcrowding. At this point, Dublin was one of the worst tenement cities in the world. It had worse slums than Glasgow or Birmingham or London. Child mortality rate is very high, and you can see why when you look at this family here, because this column here tells us how many people lived in this household and how many rooms they occupied. So you can see 10 people in one room. Now that was not unusual. You had extraordinary overcrowding, and also in rural areas you had quite small two-room cottages, which would have been the norm, and people having to manage that. And of course that goes directly into women's lives. How do they manage this? They're the people who have to run these households, to feed the children, to keep the place clean, to cook, to look after chickens, to make butter, to do all of those kinds of things that were there to keep things going. And it also challenges all of our modern ideas about privacy. The idea of 10 people, often people of more than 2 generations, sharing one room together. And I can tell you, because I know that the houses in Church Street did not have big rooms, so this would have been quite a small room. So you would have been looking at people, children like head to toe. Nowadays children think it's child abuse if they don't get their own bedroom and in the bathroom on the suite and screens on them. Back then they would have been head to toe under coats on a mattress on the floor and expected to survive in that kind of environment. So this page here tells us a great deal. Sometimes you get the name of the land owner here, and that can be very interesting too. So that's another thing you can look at in terms of what was going on at the time. The last forms which I have here are the out offices and farmsteadings, and that is not usually relevant to city houses, although it can be. Usually it's relevant to rural houses where we would have farmyards and so on. But often in the city, of course, at this point in time, you would have had animals being kept. And we find in Church Street that we have a number of stables, coach houses, don't have any harness rooms. We have cow houses, which when people were keeping cattle behind their houses at this point in time. Calf houses, a dairy, which would have been a common thing to have, a piggery, and there were pigs kept in the city right up to the 1970s, I remember them myself. Fowl house, which meant this person was keeping chickens. Boarding house, no. A store, a turf house, a potato house, a workshop, a shed, a store, a forge, or a laundry. So that kind of things like that. Quite a number of outhouses, mainly sheds and turf houses for the storage of fuel at the back of these people's houses in Church Street at that point in time. Church Street was the scene of a major disaster in 1912 when two houses collapsed and killed 7 people. And as a result of that, there was a commission inquiry into the housing conditions of the working classes, which found, surprise, that the members of Dublin Corporation, which was the authority that was supposed to provide housing, were the main rack-rent landlords in the slums, and were making a fortune out of these houses with no intention of obeying their own regulations to bring them up to scratch. So that caused something of a scandal. Now, we're just going to look through a few more bits and pieces about how that was. Henrietta Street, again the north side of the city. Just to show you this photograph here. Now, Henrietta Street is the home of the King's Inn, which is one of our most beautiful buildings. You can see it here at the top. This is the back of it, facing out onto Henrietta Street. The front faces out the other way. It's where our barristers meet. And as we know, barristers, lawyers, are hugely important members of any society, and they must have a very glamorous building in which to foregather and do their business. And they have. And this, well, at this point in time, in the early 1920s, Henrietta Street is a slum. And you can see the children are playing on the street here on either side. Just to give you an idea of what it's like. Remember, we looked at the one in terms of Church Street. We're going to see the map here for Henrietta Street. Because we're on Wi-Fi, the reason it's slow is that we're competing with the rest of the hotels, so we should be having to work There was a house on Henrietta Street in 1911 which contained 104 people. Which went astonishing to us here. And you can see here when you look at number 7, and this is, I think, the house in question. 19 families living in number 7 Henrietta Street. 2 people in 2 rooms, 8 people in 2 rooms, 1 person in 1 room, 6 people in 2 rooms, 7 people in 2 rooms, 9 people in 3 rooms, 9 people in 2 rooms, etc. So again, there was recently, one of the unintended social consequences of the census has been that people have stopped feeling ashamed about having poor ancestors, which really pleases me greatly. They became so interested in finding their grandmother and their grandfather that they forgot to feel ashamed that they actually lived in a single occupancy household with 10 kids. And it's now shifted into feeling that these were heroic people, which of course they were, to be able to rear that many children in such terrible circumstances. And there was a TV program which went out last summer called Tenements in 4 Parts, which was inspired by the census, and I played quite a large part in it. But they managed to get a family who had lived in Henrietta Street, in that house that we just looked at, number 7, until the 1950s. It was a wonderful old lady who was now in her 80s, and all her kids who remember growing up. And they asked them to go back in to live in the room they had lived in originally for a weekend and see what it was like. And of course, you may not know this, but last winter was the worst winter Ireland ever had. It was 1847, it was snow so close. So they went in during this freezing cold winter and had to find fuel on the streets to light fires and cook whatever they could get their hands on. The men had to go out and see if they could get work. And it was riveting. The whole country watched it and got really into it. But it was lovely because it actually allowed people to reclaim ownership of a difficult past and to understand that actually people have no choice. And of course, one of the major things that we have to remember about women at this point in time is that no contraception is available. Even if it had been, so many women now were fervent Catholics, they wouldn't have used it. So if you look at some of the census returns, you see pregnancies year after year after year after year, women dying in childbirth, young, and so on. So it's a real condition. Now just one last piece of misery before I drive you over to cheers.